Working Cows Podcast, episode 378. This episode is brought to you by the Patreon supporters.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios. And I wanted to let you know, again, remind you, I'll be speaking at the Regenerative Legacy Summit coming up August 13th at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, August 13th. You can tune in and see me live. I'll be talking about biblical stewardship, more than just God created the world, we should take care of it, but what does it mean that God created the world and that we are created in His image, and how does that all fit into how we think about taking care of what He's entrusted to us? So some of those things, and answering some of the common stories that we've been told over the years about our place in the world and what we should be doing and how we should be thinking about who we are and some of those things. So yeah, really excited to share that. Excited for the Regenerative Legacy Summit. Looks like a great event. Just looking at the list of speakers here, names Melinda Sims, Cal Hardage, Joel Salatin, Steve Campbell, Rob Havard, Richard and Tina McConnell. So a lot of people who you've heard from on the podcast, or should have heard from by now, or will hear from in the near future, Lord willing, on the Working Cows Podcast, among others, many others also. So it's a 2-day deal, both days, August 13th and 14th. But I will be speaking specifically at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. There will be a link in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/378, where you can go and register for the Regenerative Legacy Summit, and you can catch all of these different speakers kind of half an hour at a time over the 2-day period, August 13th and 14th. Really looking forward to that. So today, what I'm excited to share with you is a conversation with Greg Christiansen. I'm really excited to have Greg back. Greg is a goat and sheep raiser, producer, grazer in east central Kansas. So kind of halfway north and south, all the way on the east edge of Kansas. And he and Dale Strickler are partnering together to host a sheep and goat grazing and a cow grazing school. So kind of two different schools. You can register for either or both of them. And they will be taking place the week of September 9th through the 13th. You will have the grazing school taking place September 9th, 10th, and 11th. That's with Dr. Elizabeth Heilman and Dale Strickler. And then also same town, Garnett, Kansas, on the 12th and 13th, you will have the option to be part of the goat and sheep school that's instructed by Greg Christiansen and Dale Strickler. So, or you can take both of them over the course of all of those days together. So pretty awesome opportunity. If you're interested in that, again, you can find links to that as well at workingcows.net/378. So we're going to talk to Greg about kind of some of the things that'll be covered in the school and just kind of his philosophy and how he thinks about raising goats and sheep and integrating cattle back into their operation. Last time we talked to him, it was all of them together as part of their operation. They sold the cows, and now they are bringing cows back in, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons why they're doing that. So, Greg, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Not quite half of the episodes ago I had you on, so it's been too long, but saw that you and Dale Strickler were partnering together on a grazing school there. Is that going to be at your place?
Well, we'll do some of the afternoons at my place. The plan is we'll meet at a cafe in Garnett, Kansas, which is about 20 minutes from my house. And in the morning, it'll be more of a classroom type slide presentation, question and answer. And then we'll go out in the afternoon after lunch and we'll actually see and look at what we talked about that morning. Um, what I found out is that either I'm not a very good communicator and instructor, and that's probably it, or people just have questions that I think I've answered, but then I don't know, it's just something about when you can see it and touch it, and you actually see it in working, and there's things that I forget. I do a YouTube channel. Maybe I'll be showing somebody um, something to do with the fencing. And I'll come back on and say, well, one more thing. And I'll do that 3 or 4 times because I forgot something. And even when I'm done, I forgot something. And so I'm hoping that, you know, people asking questions, people seeing it, can make it more clear. Just the little things about, um, let's just say fencing sheep and goats, for instance, that make it easier.
Yeah, and that is a big part of it, right? I think a big part of success with sheep in a rotational grazing system, whoever's acronym you want to use, is reducing the labor. Has that been true in your experience?
Yes, I'll tell you, when you start paying people that you employ, your labor becomes much more real to you than if it's just you, and you start thinking about, well, okay, this is taking me an extra, whatever it is, 2 hours a day. I've got to be making sure that I can get back that money invested in that labor. So yes, that's a big deal. And honestly, I mean, sometimes we want to do things that I'm sure would improve our soil health, that would improve our grazing management. The labor, the cost of the labor, or the availability of the labor gets in the way, and it has to be weighed. One of the things at the school that we'll talk about is profit. Um, and I wasn't so keen on profit till I took ranching for profit, and then I took it a second time. But yeah, if you're not profitable, and I mean, if you're doing goats, sheep as a hobby, why not be profitable? Um, Even if it's a hobby, you're going to get, it's a lot of work involved. So yeah, we're going to look at the profitability of goats and sheep, of the grazing strategies, of the fencing. I mean, honestly, you can't afford to put out a bunch of woven wire fencing on your place, or if you're renting or leasing a place for sheep and goats. You'd just be years trying to get that money back. And so the way we fence is effective and it's economical. And we'll teach that. It's electric. Basically, it's one electric wire in a lot of places. Um, and there's ways you can just make that easier if you're setting it up, doing it. Um, I have to laugh sometimes because I think, well, what qualified me to have this ranching school, this goat and sheep grazing school? And basically, it's because I've been doing it for 20 years and I did all the wrong things, and I can save somebody else, hopefully, from making the same mistakes. And you'll be, 15 years at least down the road from where I was when I started, because I can say, hey, don't do this. Here's a better way, and maybe somebody can show me a better way. I hope so.
Yeah, and that's a big part of going to a school, right? Is the ability to network with other people who've got a unique set of experiences, and yeah, that'll be a real good opportunity. There'll be links in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/377. Will be the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/377. You can go there and find links to the regenerativewisdom.com page and specifically to the different schools. We're going to try and get Dale Strickler on to talk about that as well, which will be the regenerative, the grazing school, and then there's the sheep and goat school, or you can take them both together. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Dale, I've known Dale for probably 15 years. I was doing a program that he was doing. And, if I have grazing questions or a question about, what cover crop to plant or perennial, I go to Dale. And it's because of the principles that we follow from him that we've increased our herd size, well, basically without increasing much of our land mass, really at all. Every year, we have more forage than the year before, and we have more livestock than the year before. And we keep thinking, well, we're probably going to be maxed out. For instance, this year, same thing. We're looking at from last year's perspective into this year. Oh, we're going to need, this much forage. Now we did get more rain in the spring, but we do that about every spring. But so, yeah, we're able to graze 20 dry cows we brought in and 50 yearlings because we have so much forage that, well, I don't know if I'd say it's going to waste, but it might as well make us money. Because what happens, you can't graze small ruminants. You can't really use up all your forage because of the parasite load that they'll encounter, let's just say after 5 or 7 days or whatever you want to rotate. Well, there's going to be a lot of forage still out there. And so, yeah, we brought in 50 steers that were custom grazing, and we're running those behind the sheep and goat herd there. The sheep and goats are going to go in and they're going to eat the weeds, the stuff. And right now they're a higher value animal than these steers. And we're not doing it on the gain. They're not looking for a lot of gain on them. And so then we'll eat the ragweed, the thistles, the ironweed, locust hedge, all that kind of stuff. They won't eat very much fescue. They don't care for it, but they'll nibble at the tips. And then those steers will come in. But so we've learned a lot of that from Dale, and Dale's school will be the 9th, 10th, and 11th at the same Dutch Country Cafe in Garnett, Kansas. He's going to do the same thing. He's going to teach in the mornings, like a classroom setting, and then go out in the afternoon. He has a farm south of Garnett. And I don't know, he mentioned even coming to our farm, maybe, one time during his school too. And then, so that lasts till Wednesday. Then Thursday, Friday, we'll start our school, which the foundation of raising sheep and goats is kind of coming from Dale's knowledge of forage and what we've been able to do. But then we're going to do the nuts and bolts of actually raising the livestock a little bit more than what Dale will talk about. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. And that, that's one of the things that we're probably on a trajectory to be in a similar business. Eventually, we'd like to scale up our sheep because we finally figured out how to run sheep in less than net fencing, which is a lot of work. Net fencing is a lot of work. And so we haven't ever just dove into doing net fencing solely. We have done it for probably a year, but decided, okay, we got to figure out a way to reduce this labor. And now we've kind of got that dialed in. And somebody one time stopped me and said, Aren't you the Working Cows podcast guy? When I was at the sheep sale barn in Newell, South Dakota, and I said, yeah, I'm my sheep and somebody else's cows. That's kind of where I'd like to end up at some point. And that sounds similar to what your business is, your small ruminants that you own, and then custom grazing cows for somebody else.
Yeah, so we owned cows up until about, I don't know, let's say 3 years ago, before they got high. So we sold out, and they weren't near what they are now. And because we wanted to increase our goat and sheep herd, they were making more money. Well, of course, as soon as you do something like that, things flip flop, and now the cattle guys are doing real well, and the sheep and goat market is not as high as what it was about 3 to 4 years ago. We had sold kids for $4.50 a pound, but now they're probably down in that 250 to 325 range or so. And the sheep have kind of held their own. They're still up around 270 for a lamb. Kind of depends on when you sell. The best months normally to sell would be December, January, February, March, even. But I tell you what happened though, when we got rid of the cattle, we started experiencing more parasite issues. Yeah, and well, I guess that's another thing of what not to do. And so that was one reason we started bringing in. Last year we brought in these dry cows for that reason, and then this year the calves, kind of the same deal. And so they just kind of break that parasite cycle, just with a different species. And so I'd encourage people that hey, the cows. Maybe let's just say the market turned around and the cows weren't as profitable, or calves or whatever. But if you could bring some in and graze for somebody else, then sure, it's going to help you in the long run. I mean, even if you owned the cattle and you broke even on them, but you took care of your parasites, your goats and sheep are going to be better off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of goes to that idea of finding the right customer. Like you got to find the customer who's not looking for the gain necessarily. Maybe the dry cows, they're a little bit lower maintenance requirement animal, class of animal. And so then there is that opportunity to send the sheep and the goats through first and bring the cows in second. How far behind, or how much time is there between the sheep and the goats and the cattle?
They can come in the next day, and honestly, they could graze together, and that's fine too. We don't have them together right now because, when we move the sheep and goats, we've still got there's still so much forage there that the cattle are that much farther behind because they're still eating what the goats and sheep left. But they can graze together. We do have places they graze together. And to find a person like that, like, okay, one of the guys with the dry cows is a guy that I know, a friend that he calves in the fall. And so he'll bring us these as soon as they come off. He's got cover crops of cereal rye. And when they kind of get done with that, he'll bring them to us and we'll keep them up. I think he'll start calving maybe middle of September, 1st of September. He'll come get them. The calves, I would say if you can look for somebody that has maybe a background in yard, that's what these came from, and so this guy gets them in. They're not his cattle. He backgrounds them for someone else. But then he said, yeah, if I can move these out of my background in yard after a few weeks, I can move some more in. See, and then he can do his turnover quicker. We got some that's already straightened out for the most part. I mean, we've doctored a few, but so that kind of person is usually a good candidate to bring you some calves. Uh, I mean, you got to get along, and that's part of it. But yeah, that'd be the kind of person I'd look for. Somebody with a little background in yard. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about earlier about the goats coming in and goats and sheep coming in, eating the weeds, eating, different things. And then, it's still good grazing after that for the sheep or for the cows.
Yep.
And I've heard it said that goats will eventually work themselves out of a job, that they'll take care of the brush to the point that they really can't do as well on the grass that's there as they would if there was some more browse available. Is that true in your experience?
Well, they could, I suppose. You know what? It's almost like weeds and brush always grow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're in the middle of a drought. I mean, you always have weeds and brush, you know. And so if you continuously grazed that property, that pasture, maybe they could eat themselves out of a job. And that's what, when we only had goats, we started experiencing that, and we weren't rotating them. It was more of continuous graze at that time several years ago, and we started losing our brush and losing our weeds, and so then we brought in the sheep. That's kind of one reason we went towards sheep. But now, as we're rotating them more, no, we seem to always have weeds and brush. If you wanted to eradicate a pasture, let's say a brush, you probably would need to continuously graze that, because moving them off, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna the leaves are gonna come back. Um, I've noticed we have a little bit more brush. We're not killing it out as we rotate. Um, so I think it's pasture management. And when I say weeds and brush, I look at it as forage. You know, and I have a landlord, and so yeah, his pasture growed up, and there's weeds and brush there. And he says, "Well, are you gonna bush hog that? I said, "No, I'm growing forage." And we turn the livestock in there, and now he can understand, I think. And but yeah, it's a whole different mindset when you start looking at weeds and brush as forage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And weeds is just the conventional term, right? They're actually a species of forage called forbs, and generally
Yeah.
they're higher in a lot of good things
Yep.
than other things. I've got a set of replacement heifers right now at my house that have been there since the middle of May. Now we're talking at the end of July here, and this will come out in the middle of August, and so but one thing I've noticed about these replacement heifers is, as we have them in shade paddocks where there are deciduous trees, they do not eat salt or mineral, but they will eat leaves off of the trees. And so I think they're wise critters. They've learned how to balance their own diets and find those things that are helpful for them in this moment, and they're doing well from what I can tell externally, and examining manure, pats and everything like that. Right. They're doing well. And so I'm not going to try and control what they eat necessarily. I think that's the other thing is, I think weeds, forbs, brush are part of a diverse, healthy ecosystem in a balanced way. Now, they can get out of balance. They can take over. If we mismanage them, they can be too much. But I think that we should be willing to tolerate some of them, and it's probably not a very good goal to have zero. Same with flies. Like, we can spend a lot of money getting to zero flies, but what are we going to sacrifice on the way there? Aside from the economics of spending all the money, what else are we impacting getting to zero flies or zero barber pole worms or whatever those things are? If they're not causing us economic losses, then maybe we should just tolerate their presence some, I think.
Yeah, we look for pasture diversity, I mean, if you could see our pastures, it is diverse as you could ever imagine. But somebody might look at it and say, "Well, yeah, but that's a lot of weeds." It's diversity. It's you know, I don't see it as weeds, and I don't know what all things those are doing to my microbial activity and to my soil health. I don't really know, but I've I mean, I feel good about looking out there, and it's not a solid uh, field of fescue, which
Mm.
is what many cattle producers would probably rather see. And one of the things, and we maybe talked before about, we put a lot of our goats and some sheep out with other producers where, like, one guy might own the pasture, another guy might rent the pasture, put his cows on it, but he didn't want to mow the weeds and brush and take care of that. So allows us to put our goats and sheep on it. And so we come in there and we fence it with a single hot wire around the perimeter. And yeah, I always feel like a guest on their place. I mean, but we get along, and they stay there most of the place we have. They stay there all year long. Um, there could be split into two pastures or a paddock or something where we feed hay and he feeds hay, or they may not. And I take hay and he takes hay, and his cows eat some of mine, and my goats eat some of his. But we kind of get along, and I know about, and he probably does too, how much his livestock should eat. And well, honestly, we try to put out more than our share, because it is a good opportunity for us, and I want them to be happy.
Yep.
But that's a huge deal, for somebody with, especially goats. Sometimes sheep are a little harder to sell because they got a bad rap because they've not been managed properly. Um, but no, we're gonna go over that in the grazing school a lot because I think it's a great opportunity for young people coming back to the ranch. And they don't have an extra land, but they don't want to go out and buy property. But and I mean, there's more grazing out there than we can take care of, honestly, in our neighborhood. And I'm sure as I drive around and you see it too, it's probably the same way everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. As I said earlier, I actually said incorrectly earlier, but nobody will ever know because that part will be edited out. This will be workingcows.net/378 for the show notes page for today. And there'll be links to regenerativewisdom.com and the grazing school specifically. And so it's kind of being marketed as a two-part school, grazing school and sheep and goat school, or you can do all of them together and get the whole experience. So pretty neat opportunity. But kind of what you've just been talking about there, and again, the links will be in workingcows.net/378. What you've just been talking about there will be covered kind of under that access land without going into debt piece, right? You're talking about kind of these
that's right.
dual use places where there's already cows there, but maybe they'll let you bring sheep in, don't have to, or sheep and goats in, don't have to buy the land, but you get access to it. So talk to me a little bit more about your experience with that. I mean, and especially that piece you were talking about with the sheep being mismanaged in the past. What did that look like, and what were kind of the results of that?
Yeah, the sheep being mismanaged. Sheep don't like to eat hay, and you can put hay out. If there's anything green out there, they're gonna eat it, and they're gonna eat it pretty short. Um, and so, yeah, there's times we've had, we will move them around, or sometimes, like, we would just have a little sacrifice area. But that, honestly, when we have a sacrifice area, it comes back the next year the best grass on the place. Um, and maybe that's a characteristic of our environment, our spring cool season grass is coming on, because we feed hay there. We're bringing in organic matter, nutrients, and so. But if you would just, you know, the feed and hay part, or if you let them overgraze, and I don't care, I think it's easier for sheep to eat lower to the ground. Um, they're just good at it, but you don't want that either because that's where they're going to pick up parasites.
Right.
And so it's gonna be to your advantage if you can move them around. And let's say, see, we have some pastures that the owner of the pasture or the person that has the cows on it, um, they we don't cross fence it because they don't understand that kind of grazing, and so we're sort of just trying to get along with them, and so it's continuous grazing on our sheep. So we've got to just manage the number of them we put on there. So one place we have right now, we have some sheep there. It's got Cerisa lespedeza, which is a noxious weed, here in Kansas. And it's taken over a lot of places, but he asked us to bring the sheep over to take care of that. They'd sprayed it. Tried different things. Nothing was working. And they honestly tried their own goats, but they don't have time. They're trying to manage their cattle operation, and so he said, "Hey, if you want to, do the fencing," and that's what we do. We make it as easy for the landowner as possible. If you know, if I see somebody and I mention, "Hey, if you want we have sheep and goats that would take care of that brush for you. You're out there with a bush hog, and you're bush hogging it every year, and it obviously doesn't work because you did it last year." And if the guy would say, "Well, what do I got to do?" I say, "You don't have to do anything. We'll put up the fence. We'll pay for the fence. The fence is ours. If we ever leave, we'll take the fence with us. Um, we'll manage the sheep or goats. If something happens and they get out, which is very rare, they call us. You don't have to lose any sleep over it. Like I said, I just act, I try to be a guest on their place, make it almost impossible for them to say no. I mean, who would? And so, we do that fencing. Well, one thing about when we do the fencing, their cattle don't get out anymore. That one single hot wire around there that's no more than maybe 12, 18 inches high, their cattle don't get out. They like that. They don't want me to take that fence up and go anywhere. So, the weeds become, now I don't graze it hard enough that the weeds are non-existent. I just graze it where they're manageable, where, it's not the tallest thing out in the pasture. So yeah, there's a tremendous opportunity because the biggest obstacle to get into ag is getting the land, having a place to work out of. And so, yeah, what if you could get a place? I mean, it's almost impossible to rent land anywhere. I don't know about where you are here. If anything comes up for rent, it's already rented before you even know about it. Well, what if you could put, sheep or goats in with that person that just rented that property? And when you start taking that pasture bill out of the equation, it's huge. Yeah. It's a big deal, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on fencing. And that's one thing that, we'll teach. And I've tried to show on my YouTube videos how that works. But yeah, that's the way we do it. It's economical, it's quick, it's easy. And just by the way, we've never been kicked off a place or took our fence down or had to leave. I got some of those deals we'd have for 15 years or longer. And there's other ones, if I pursued them, we could have that, we don't have time or we don't need them right now. We don't need that pasture.
Right. And you're kind of west central or east central Kansas, right? I mean, you're hour and a half southwest of Kansas City or so.
Yeah. yeah, south. Well, just directly south.
Okay.
If you think more of like Missouri, that's what our place would probably remind you of. Than Kansas, we're not in the Flint Hills. We're not in the flat open plains. It's more like Missouri around here.
Yep.
Um, fescue's predominant. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, but just kind of give people an idea of the context and maybe the opportunity that exists there. If somebody wants to be entrepreneurial about it and parachute drop in and find a place to put some goats, there's probably opportunity if you're willing to knock on some doors.
Yeah, and I don't know what it would be like west of here so much. I can just tell you from here east when it'd be real similar here, and I cannot see it not being an opportunity for somebody. I don't know. I just can't imagine it, honestly. As I drive down the road, you probably do too. You're just looking, you see goat feet everywhere. So it's not being utilized.
Let's talk a little bit about the way that you integrate livestock into some of the crop ground that you guys have. Take a little bit of a left turn here, but what does that look like? First of all, kind of lay out maybe your crop rotation and how you're approaching that, and then where the livestock come in.
So our crop rotation, we've been using cereal rye, cover crop with some other stuff mixed into it in the fall. Let's say after our soybeans come off, for where we'll go, and the next year might be soybeans again. It might be corn, could be wheat. Then we wouldn't put cereal rye, of course. But so we've got that cereal rye base, and then we did get very little grazing in the fall from that. But springtime, we'll be able to graze that. We grazed, I don't know, probably 450, 500. It was using nannies combined. We kitted them out on 90 acres, I guess, of that kind of forage. And if you go to that video, and you'll see we made terrible mistake, because there was no cover. We were moving them. We use what's called a smart fence. It's made by Gallagher, and I don't get paid by them. I probably sold more of that fence for them but the smart fence, it's 4 strands. You can just put it all up together. Mm-hmm. But it's enabled us to graze places effectively that we couldn't before. And so we were grazing that cereal rye, but then we had a tremendous amount of rain, and then there was more rain supposed to move in. And one thing about sheep and goats is when they're small like that, it's really stressful to move them. So we were trying to move. We had about a quarter mile because we wanted to put them where they could get under some trees and brush for cover. And it didn't turn out well. We had mismothering. We had, basically that was it. And some we just had to go back and pick up and then try to get with their moms. So that was a mistake. And, but that we can graze a lot of that cereal rye. Another thing we found out too is that we would fly some on earlier in the soybeans. Well, that really didn't work as good because it was still too late to graze it that fall. And then that spring, it actually went to seed. Once the head starts coming out of it, they just really don't like it. Well, it did that. It didn't stay vegetative as long for us, see? And so we kind of said, well, you know what? We just drill it like we do the other. We were only doing that where we wanted to graze, but we're just going to go in and drill it, and it'll stay vegetative longer into June. So we kid and lamb first of May. And it seemed like that cereal rye, you look at it one day and it's maybe 4 inches tall, and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get ready to turn out on it. And in a week, it's a foot and a half. It seems like it's a real short window, and then in a couple of weeks, they don't like it. So if we plant it a little later, and triticale would probably be a better better suit for us there. So then using that smart fence, we were grazing that, and we have to haul water then. And we have like a hay trailer with 3 water totes on it. And it just gravity flows into little half of a barrel we cut off. It doesn't probably hold 20 gallons, which is enough for them at that time. They won't drink much if they're on good forage. And then there's another piece that would normally probably planted soybeans or corn. We were actually would have rotated to corn this year. The corn market's not very good. Expenses are high. We were penciling out corn and decided, let's just plant a forage there. When they were coming off a place we had planted oats in the spring. And so let's move them from that oats when they're done over to this, which is just across the fence. And so we did that. We grazed that, and that we strip grazed with 2 poly wires. We have a system set up on our 4-wheeler. And you can just run your fence without ever getting off the 4-wheeler, step your post in. And so we copied it from somebody and works real well. And we didn't run a back fence for a while because those kids and lambs, when they're that small, you're moving them, it's just stressful on them. But we found out really we needed to, because they were going back and picking up a lot of parasites, grazing too close to the ground. They may have 2.5, 3 foot of forage in front of them, but you know what? Some of them just wanted to go back and regraze where they were. And so we had to start bringing a fence behind them. That instance got very labor intensive, and I'm not sure if that was really worth the effort, plus the cover crop expense and thing there. Maybe using the smart fence. It's a bigger herd that we did end up using a smart fence on that. It took about 3 sections of it, I think, to span that stretch we were on.
Sure. What kind of difference does it make on the actual crop itself? Do you think that there's some benefits there that you are noticing?
Well, that's one of the reasons we chose to graze that piece of property where we were going to plant corn. And we'll see. I want to think it does. Can I prove it? I can't prove it. Now, over where I told you we had that cereal rye then, and we had to move them off when the rain came. Well, we had part of it grazed down real short. We planted a non-GMO soybean there. And I'll tell you, the part that we had grazed down real short, it got really weedy. And where we had left the cereal rye, it did hold the weeds back a lot more. And so that's one thing we have to consider now when we're doing that. Now, will the crop be better? I guess we'll find out. A lot of those things are just hard to put your finger on.
Yeah, there's so many variables.
I know. I want to think that yes, it's helping us. And we did some soil tests this year that we'll find out more about as we go through the years. We did the PLFA test with Lance Gunderson,
Mm-hmm.
and so we couldn't see a big difference early on. That would have been early. When we were planting, say back in May,
mm-hmm.
of any of the microbial activity from one side to the other. Interesting. So then, we did a same test on some woods that had never been plowed, never been fertilized, anything. And the organic matter of the woods was something like 7.5%.
Mm.
And our farm ground side was, and it was still really good. It was we're always up in the between 4 and 5,
mm-hmm.
Which is unusual for this area. But I mean, we've done cover crops for a lot of years, and I attribute it to that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that cover is the big thing, right? Getting that soil cover on the ground and not taking too much of it when you're grazing to leave some cover
Right.
there. And I think that does, at least in my very, very limited understanding, help with the, ground temperature, weed suppression, all those things are
Yeah.
kind of the name of the game as far as cover crops on cash grain acres.
I'll just say during kidding and lambing, it's just difficult to move those when you want them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. We're trying to think of different ways we can do that. It's difficult to move them, and it's stressful on them. I don't know. I think that stress in sheep and goats is a bigger killer than we realize, or at least in performance. They just cannot handle stress at all.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the compounding and cascading effects of stress are beyond what we can imagine, and I think that they are, it can go either way. If we have a real low stress kind of a system that they're comfortable running through all the time, those things are going to add a lot of value in the long run, and just even weaning weights are going to be impacted by those things, and I think it's way earlier than we anticipate that those kinds of things are impacted. And so will there be any stockmanship involved in the school at all, or will you have any kind of ability to answer some of those questions as far as people who are looking to understand how to in a more low stress way handle sheep and goats?
Yep. Actually, I'm planning on that now. Now I'm a big student of Bud Williams. We've taken their class from Tina and Richard. Know them real well, and actually, they've helped us on moving large herds when the kids are small, lambs are small. And I've sent them videos and things, and they've helped us a lot on that. So we will be doing some stockmanship. We'll have some sheep and goats up here. What I mean is we'll actually handle them. There is a little difference in handling if you've got sheep and maybe sometimes you're pushing them towards a gate and they just don't want to go in because they know their prey and they don't know what's in that gate. But there are ways they seem to respond more to reverse parallel, if you know what I'm talking about. Yep. That kind of handling, they seem to respond real well to that. And goats are even different. Now, goats will go on through the gate. Goats are always looking for a hole, and they'll go on through the gate. And if you have some goats in the sheep herd, it'll help you out a lot. Also, the guard dog will go through the gate. The sheep will go through. And we drive herds of sheep and goats down the road to another pasture that we're rotating to quite frequently. You try to do it as low stress as you can. Well, I'll tell you what, the kids and lambs are real bad about. Too hard. They'll be 30, 40, 50. I'm just turn around and go back where they came from. And they'll just run right past. You can't stop them. And so you just got to handle them easily. And they don't stay paired up real well like cows and calves would. That's another difference of them. You just have to handle them pretty easy. And sometimes we'll just let them drift themselves through a gate, or we'll push a few in there, but leave the gate open so they can come back and forth. And then by the next day or two, they're all moved. If it's just, through a gate type of a move.
Sure.
But yeah, we plan on doing that kind of stockmanship in the school. Yes.
I think practicing with animals through our systems that they're going to flow through regularly is a big part of it. I think that's something that Tom Nossinger has really taught the world, is that the value of practicing those things. But then also, I think the open the gate and come back tomorrow is a big one. That's something that we probably don't do enough of. And then somebody recently said, if livestock get out, go to the house and have lunch, even if it's not lunchtime. And once they've filled up on whatever they're on that's fresh, it'll be a lot easier to get back where you want them. I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, and you'll be a lot more level-headed to put them back. Exactly.
I was recently finished up preaching through the book of Matthew, and when I came to the parable of the sheep and the goats, I made the point that it's pretty easy to tell which one's a sheep and which one's a goat, because the goat is the one that's outside the fence and the sheep is the one that's inside the fence. And
yeah,
you'd appreciate that.
Yeah. But honestly, I'll have to say, if we get something out like between paddocks, they won't get out the perimeter, and it's really not as good a fence as we have between paddocks. But it could be used just as easy as a nanny, and maybe even more so. And they got that hair on them; they don't get shocked as well, too.
Sure.
But there's a kind of a trick to building that paddock fence when you're working with sheep and goats. It's different than cattle. You want more posts closer together that will hold that wire more rigid, and it'll bite down in their skin, see, when they try to go through it or something.
Yep.
So yeah, you'll need maybe twice as many posts.
Sure. Are you using an O'Brien post generally, or what do you like?
Yeah, if it's a temporary deal, we use the O'Briens, like with that like we're stringing 2 wires of poly wire, strip grazing something. Then, here where I live, we have paddocks, let's say they're 5 acres with a tire tank in the middle of it. And so those are more permanent paddocks of high tensile wire with fiberglass, 3/8 fiberglass post in them. And then the smart fence comes with its own post onto that system. Yeah.
Yep. Very good. Yeah. Appreciate that. Anything else major you want to communicate here on this topic before I point toward wrapping up?
I'm rather profit minded. So we're going to bring in some principles from Ranch for Profit and some spreadsheets that on the second day of the school, because sometimes I tell you what, it's very difficult to know if you make a profit. I don't care if it's cows or ewes or nannies. I mean, you feed a cow 1 year, she calves the next year, and you may not sell that calf till the next year. Make a profit, you took home a check. So there's some ways that I've used to track that and learn through Ranch for Profit and just made work for myself. And so we're gonna be very profit minded. The fencing's a big deal. We'll have we'll actually look at the FAMACHA scoring. We'll run some animals through, and you can kind of look and see how you can do that, because people say, well, I mean, that just takes too long, and I can't do that many. I mean, we'll do 500 of them and start early when it's cool and be done by 2 or 3 o'clock. And it's not difficult, and it doesn't consume a lot of time. And the wormer, the way we worm and why we use a combination system of worming, that's real important. And you know what? They come out now with combination wormer for cattle. If you might have seen that, it's relatively new. It's got Tramadol, which is an old product we used to use, and I forget what the other one is with it. But yeah, the combination worming system, and we'll look at that. Basically, with sheep and goats, if you can keep them in and keep them alive, there's really no reason you shouldn't make a profit.
Right.
Those 2 things. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's what we'll look at in the school and how to do that.
Yeah, and that's the accusation, right? When you start trying to run a low input cow herd, somebody's eventually going to say to you, well, why don't you just run deer? That sounds like what you're trying to make is a deer. Well, that may be right or wrong, but a sheep or a goat is a heck of a lot closer to a deer, which does survive 365 days a year without inputs, basically, other than what they may or may not borrow from a rancher. You know, and so that's you know, if you're going to answer that accusation, maybe the goats and the sheep are the way to do that.
Yeah. Nobody goes out and unrolls hay for the deer,
right? Yep.
Although they probably eat with them some, but yeah.
Right. Yep. Well, so yeah, just one more time, links in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/378. The grazing school is going to happen September 9th, 10th, and 11th in Garnett, Kansas. And then the goat and sheep school will be the days following, September 12th and 13th. And there's one or both. Either or both is an option as far as registration, and you can go and find that in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/378. Greg, thanks for your time today.
Hey, thank you, Clay. I really appreciate it, and appreciate being on here and everything you're doing for the industry.
Very good stuff there. Again, if you're interested in it, Regenerative Legacy Summit, August 13th and 14th. That's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. I'll be speaking at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, August 13th. But a whole host of others, Richard and Tina McConnell, Joel Salatin, Steve Campbell, Melinda Sims, Bob Havard, you know, just call the roll, and they're going to be on there kind of 30 minutes at a time throughout those 2 days. So pretty awesome opportunity. Encourage you to check out the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/378, to get signed up for the Regenerative Legacy Summit. Also encourage you to check out maybe getting signed up for this opportunity with the Goat and Sheep School and the Grazing School with Dale Strickler. So you can do them both. You can do either or both of them, taking place September 9th through the 13th in Garnett, Kansas. And again, also linked in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/378. Got another episode with the crew over at Understanding Ag coming your way real soon. I think the direction we're going to head with that episode is I'm going to share some Q&A sessions that I recorded at a recent Soil Health Academy. I was recently able to attend the Soil Health Academy hosted by the Turner Ranches in Fort Pierre, South Dakota, and the crew there at Understanding Ag was generous enough to let me record their Q&A sessions that they did at the end of day 1, I believe, and at the start of day 2, or maybe it was the start of both of those days. Anyways, they let me record it and said, you know, you can share that as an episode someday. And so that's what we're going to do, coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.